HR leaders, what's on your mind these days? Is it AI? Is it the economy? The talent market? Remote work? Retention? DEI? Pay transparency? New laws? Our 2024 Workplace Trends Report outlines how HR leaders are thinking about these challenges and what they believe will help their organizations overcome them. Want to find out what they said? Head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/Workplace Trends 2024 and download the report to find out.
When I think of building a better world of work, I think of the importance in the world of the work that we do. So when you think of the different facets of life, work is obviously a huge chunk of your time. That's one aspect which is obvious, but it's also a significant slice of you as an individual.
Welcome to the People Managing People podcast. We're on a mission to build a better world of work and to help you build happy, productive workplaces. I'm your host, Tim Reitsma, and today I am joined by Simon Bray, president of REW.ca, a Canadian real estate site focusing on building a personal real estate experience. So let me ask you this. Is there such a thing as balancing people and profits? As leaders, do we prioritize one over the other, or do we strive to keep this in check? In this episode, Simon and I talk about how he focuses his time on progress, people, and profits, and how this intentional way of leadership drives trust and impact. Welcome to the People Managing People podcast, Simon. It's good to have you here. And, before we get into it, there's a connection that we have, which I don't think you know that we have, which is the company that you're the president of, REW.ca, helped me and my family buy a home. So it's kind of cool to be talking to the person behind the business who really helped us land a place that we know will be here for quite some time. So kind of a little cool connection there.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on, Tim. It's great to chat to you. I love the work that you guys are doing, just trying to shine a light on the dynamics that happen behind businesses. I mean, even your comment about REW is exactly right. People look at the website, they look at all the listings, they're like, oh, okay, well, that's a fantastic service, but they know nothing about the team and the dynamics of that team behind the scenes. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of insight there.
I think it's going to be a great conversation today. And, we're really going to be focusing around balancing people and profits. And I know when we first talked in our pre-meeting, this is something that you have seen throughout your career as an entrepreneur and intrapreneur and building companies, and that constant balance of people and profits. And I know some people listening might just say profits over everything, and some people might be listening and saying people over everything. So, I think it could lend an interesting conversation as we get into it today.
We're going to meet in the middle. As someone told me, that's a bit of a Canadian thing to do. So I'm learning that middle ground.
I love it. Yeah, we're going to meet in the middle. We're just going to have a fun conversation around that. But for those who listen, I always ask a couple leading questions just to satisfy my own curiosity. One is, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you up to these days?
Well, I mean, as you started off at the top, I'm running REW, and that's the business that I'm engaged in and excited about right now. REW is a real estate marketplace. So it's, connecting the buy side and the sell side of the market in real estate. And those kind of marketplace platforms have been businesses that I've been engaged in for the last 12, 15 years in different countries around the world. In fact, you're chatting to me while I'm at a conference down here in Miami, meeting a lot of colleagues in a similar business model in different countries. And so there's this incredible community of people around real estate marketplaces and the niche that fulfills in the various economies in different countries. And so it's been a really exciting opportunity to see how different cultures work, particularly around the asset class of real estate. Worked in Latin America, Southeast Asia, Western Europe, South Africa, which is where you can hear the accent from, and now North America and Canada. So that's the professional version of me. The personal version is I'm a fairly laid back guy, family guy, really enjoy living in Vancouver now for all of the incredible amenities that it offers, but most notably for that access to wilderness and outdoors and scenery. I very much love getting, out into nature or down by the water. And so have lived in some some cool cities around the world that offer that. But yeah, that's a little bit about me, I guess, in a nutshell.
Awesome. We're going to talk a little bit about just real estate and the finance market in a little bit as it does tie in with our topic today and how it all ties together. And throughout your career, you've been a leader in various organizations. And so I'm really curious, what does it mean to be a leader?
Still working that out. There are a lot of demands on you when you're in a leadership position. And I guess a lot of those demands kind of inform what a leader is. So what do people expect from you when you're in the room? There's a sense of future that I think you bring to a team. So that's a really key part of being a leader, is having some sense on what tomorrow is going to look like, some sense on where we're going as a team. Are we making the progress that we want to make together? And so there's that future that you bring to the engagement with the people around you. Element of that, or an implication of that, is decision making. So you hear leaders talk about that all the time. I'm called on to make tens of decisions, hundreds of decisions, and it becomes quite natural. The challenge with that decision making role in leadership is to know when to stop making decisions and kind of when to empower and enable the people around you to make the decisions that are going to move them forward and move the company forward. But certainly that's a big part of leadership. But I would say ultimately, kind of at its core, leadership is the ability to process ambiguity and uncertainty in an uncertain world and move forward with confidence and optimism, not necessarily idealism, but move forward into an uncertain future and give people around you the confidence to do the same. So it's that ability to kind of hold that uncertainty and not let it overwhelm you. I think that's at the core of leadership.
Yeah, and it's not to say leaders don't get overwhelmed, but it's how you present yourself even to your team, and not necessarily needs to be the most composed way. Straighten your tie and put on your smile, but in a way that doesn't spark fear. Or
not at all. No, that's like, yeah. I think people can certainly sense anxiety better than most emotions, and so it's not about being inauthentic. I think you've got to bring your real self, and it's actually sometimes it's very, very empowering for people to see that, hey, you're wrestling with just as much as they are, but you've understood the implications of the uncertainty and you're making a decision to move forward regardless, So it's like this, people take a lot of courage, I think, from that type of authentic leadership. But you're 100% right. It can't just be a veil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's a good lead into the next question I have that I'm super curious about, and it's actually our purpose here at People Managing People, which is when you hear that phrase, build a better world of work, what comes to mind? Or, what might we need to do in order to continue to build a better world of work?
Yeah, so when I think of building a better world of work, I think of the importance in the world of the work that we do. So when you think of the different facets of life, work is obviously a huge chunk of your time. That's one aspect which is obvious, but it's also a significant slice of you as an individual. It's like the aggregate of all your experience, all your previous engagements and networking, all of your discussions and thoughts, all of the actions that have brought you to this current point in time. You are the compound of all of that. And if you are able to bring the best of that, if you're able to kind of distill that and bring the best of that to an engagement with your colleagues in a workplace setting, you can unleash some incredible potential in each other as individuals, but also in the project that you're engaged in. And for me, that sits at the kind of, the root of that question. Building a better world of work is creating the environment and the context for that kind of activation in each other to occur. And that's the thing that gets me super excited about building businesses, is not the actual output of the business, whether that's the product that you make or the product market fit that you establish or the revenue and profit that it generates. It's actually in the activation of the team and the building of that team that's the true excitement in work. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't take a hell of a lot with you, but your life is that set of experiences and interactions and engagements with one another. That's life. And so work as part of that life experience is, the way I think about building a better world of work.
Well, I love that. And it's just a great lead into our topic today, our conversation around balancing people and profits, because what I'm hearing is we as leaders, we want to unlock the potential of our teams. How do we build a better world of work is unlocking the potential of our people and our teams. And then there's a balance to that. We want to unlock the potential, and we, as leaders, we need to be looking at, our people and making sure that they're activated and living up to their potential. But also, if that's all we focus on, can we keep paying people? And some companies have figured it out, some companies haven't. And so, is there such a thing as balancing people and profits? Maybe a little obscure, but is there such a thing, or is there one over the other? And I know right at the beginning we said, we're going to meet in the middle. So, I almost think of like this pendulum, and we're going to swing right in the middle there. But in your eyes, and what have you seen about the tension there, or is there even such a thing?
Look, there can be a tension in the short term. So when you're looking at it from a kind of micro perspective, like, I don't know, you're doing a budget for the next year, or you're trying to figure out the forecast for the next quarter, there's always that tension between the numbers and the activation and engagement of the people in the business, or the people that you want to bring into the business. And so they're absolutely in a kind of short time frame and in a constrained time box. You feel the pressure of profit versus people. But if you expand the time horizon a bit, if you kind of think about this as a multi-year project, or you think about this as your career and your engagement across, 40 years in the workplace or something, then the profit people issue, you don't see them as in tension with one another. You see them as just different parts of the same puzzle. It isn't that easy to engage people, to make them feel valued, to really create room for their full contribution. I mean, that's a challenging thing to do. It requires them to bring of themselves. It requires you to create the environment, reduce the risk, and create an opportunity for them to really explore their potential. And all of that, at least in the short term, can come at what appears to be a financial cost, And so, achieving a balance between those two is not easy. And so you spoke about the two P's, people and profit. And I often think about it in business as the third P, which is progress. It's like, if your business or your project can keep making progress, then the balance of people and profit just gets much, much easier. Because then you're having a conversation not about, are we doing the right things, or will we survive, or, the progress is what you can point to and say, whether we get there fast, whether we get there slow, we're going to continue to balance the needs of people in the business and the expansion of those people's horizons within the business with the profit that kind of fuels all of that. And so I often focus on progress over something like profit as a way to measure whether we're making a good improvement. I don't know if that's clear enough, but I'll give you an anecdote from my own career.
Sure,
in all of the businesses that I've been involved in, all of the businesses have been quite similar to one another. So it's not like I can say I've got massive experience across different industries. But the interesting thing about the business that I am in is it's sales, it's marketing, it's technology, it's operations. It's quite a diverse group of people within a business. And in all of those different business endeavors, if we can grow the business at north of 25-30% every year, if we can make that progress as a team, then we can create room in the profit margin. We can create room for increasing people's own horizon within the business. So that's things like promotions, things like cost of living increases, things like training and development budgets, the things that people want to get from their work engagement. But it also creates enough room for us to bring new people into the business, with new ideas, with new contribution. And so, yeah, in an effort to balance people and what they need with the profits to give them what they need, you need to make that progress. You need to be moving the business forward by 20, 30% a year. And that's not always easy, but it is a requirement if you want to balance that well. When it goes the other way and you're losing top line, or you're really under pressure because of a market cycle, that's when I think it can get quite difficult. Touch wood, it's been a good experience for me so far.
Well, I like that you brought in the third P, the progress. And I just think of the businesses that I've been involved in and currently in, it even ties right back to what you said about being a leader. It's that vision for the business. How does that vision translate into your plan, which then translates into progress, which then translates into the expansion of people and, ultimately profits. I mean, there could be somebody who's listening and they're a startup, pre-revenue, just burning through cash. But even in that stage, there's progress. If you got an injection of cash, 100,000, 100 million, who knows, whatever that number is, if there's no progress, well, you're never going to hit profits, and your people are going to quickly start to realize that something strange is going on here and maybe, not stick around.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as you say, different stages of business have different dynamics at play. But even if you're in a kind of pre-revenue stage and you're still trying to establish product market fit, you've got various validations where you can look at it and say, hey, we're making progress towards this goal or this plan, or we're not, and we need to reframe or readjust our direction. But yeah, people thrive when there is that path to progress. And it's not always linear, for sure. And a lot of my own personal business experience, it's been a little bit like a river. You go with the flow, you find the opportunity, you move from one thing to the next. You're going in the general direction of the ocean, but you're not trying to charge through the mountain. You'll flow around it. And over time, you'll cut the gorge that you want all the way. But, I definitely find that being able to plan for progress and the ability to monitor that progress with your team is really important to this balancing of people and profit. Because otherwise you can get kind of fixated on the profit, because that's the way you want to measure the performance of the business, or you can get fixated on the team. And it's really difficult to make everybody happy all of the time. That's one of the biggest challenges in leadership, is not confusing happiness or a general sentiment of happiness from your team as progress. You know what I mean? It's like they can be happy for a time, but if the progress is not there, there's no ways they'll be happy tomorrow. And so I think that's the tough part.
Yeah, it's what I'm hearing is it's not just business progress, but progress for individuals in an organization as well. And I was at a HR conference recently, and one of the keynote speakers was talking just about resignation stats. And I think we've all seen so many resignation stats over the last 6 months, a year. And one of the findings out of a study, and I'll see if I can quote it in the show notes, was about that upward progress. How can I progress within an organization? And where organizations are like, well, here we're watching profits, and, we can't just have all of our people become managers and then there's nobody to manage. And so how that creating that tension and that balance. But I think it's an interesting, I think we'd be amiss, and we talked about this before we hit the record button, is talking about just all the layoffs that are happening in the market. And, specifically, even in the real estate finance market, we know of a big company who, maybe did layoffs not quite the right way, but we're seeing, at least, and this is purely my opinion on this, is, companies potentially just pushing for profits and bringing a lot of people in, bringing a ton of people in to push, and maybe not seeing that lift in the organization or not seeing that progress. So then it's like, oh, we got to shrink. We're going to lay a bunch of people off now. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a tough moment that we're seeing right now. I think you've got a lot of dynamics changing all at the same time. I mean, you've been talking about it on your podcast. There's a lot that you can get into, but if you look at the current trends around, what's happening in the market, with, future outlooks for certain businesses, particularly in areas of prop tech where we're involved. You see a lot of businesses with their outlooks changing quite radically in the last 6 months as interest rate cycles change, as inflationary pressures start to bite within the real estate sector. You're seeing the layoffs, and some of them are done with dignity and some of them are not done very well. And I think you'll always see examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, work and the work that people do is so much bigger than the business or the project they happen to be connected to right now. So I think that's one element of it, that people, whether they're just starting out in a job or leaving a job or starting a business, I think it's important to be fully engaged and committed and enthusiastic about the project ahead of you, but also just see it in context that, things can change and cycles can turn, and it feels personal, but it's not as personal as you think if you
Mm-hmm.
happen to be on the wrong side of that conversation one day. And I think you're seeing that now. It's like businesses got incredibly enthusiastic about the opportunities ahead of them. I think too enthusiastic, but there are lots of pressures in this world for growth. Particularly when you're in a business, it's very hard to hold that enthusiasm from certain stakeholders back sometimes. And so
Mm-hmm.
you grow faster than you should have grown. And then you press the pause button, or worse, you press the undo, and that is very difficult, I think, for a culture inside of a business, but it's also difficult for the people who are caught up in that restructure. But I would just point to the fact that I think what you're talking about with the world of work, and you're talking about people's greater contribution to the world of work, it shouldn't just be seen narrowly through the lens of that one company that they happen to be engaging in. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
what we spoke about previously was, viewing your role within a company as an entrepreneur, connecting
Mm-hmm.
yourself effectively to the outcomes of that business in a deep and meaningful way. And then if you do that, when the writing's on the wall for that business or that business model, you'll be the first to see it. It's not going to be a surprise to you if the business is shifting. And they're kind of going to be two things that happen. The business is either going to have to pivot and you're going to be part of that solution, or the business is going to have to restructure and you're going to be part of somebody else's business. But yeah, I don't know if that's too dispassionate, but you understand what I mean. It's one of those moments where we'd love every business to keep growing and every business to be a safe place for people to work in. And I do think that should be the ambition of anybody that gets into business, and certainly the people leading businesses.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's not going to play out like that. And it's important to kind of see it for what it is.
Yeah, sometimes that plan that we've put in place doesn't lead to the progress that we had also put into place or put the people into place. And yeah, businesses and leaders make hard decisions, and whether it's pivoting the business or reduction in workforce or whatever that looks like to bring back some order and balance to an organization. I mean, whether it's for profit or not for profit, we see these ebbs and flows in the markets. And as if you're on a team or you're leading a team and you're listening to this, yeah, I love the idea that you brought up as that entrepreneur and how that plays a role in balancing people and profits and creating that culture of, you don't have to go outside to build a business. Let's create that space within the organization to experiment, to try to help solve a problem. So what I've seen and what I've heard so often is leaders say, hey, we have all these problems and we need to fix this. Otherwise we're going to, have to lay people off or let people go. And it's like, well, what if you had a problem board, or maybe you call it an opportunity board, up in your virtual office or wherever you are, and say, hey, these are some real problems or real opportunities where we need some heads behind. Man, imagine that culture of entrepreneurship that would go on. How does that work? How have you seen it work, maybe at REW or within your past experience?
Well, I think that's that level of trust that you want to have with the colleagues around you in a business. And I think that's really at the root of this entrepreneurship concept, which is, you're working inside of this business. This business is not some sort of abstract concept. that it's distant and far from you as an individual. It is, in fact, the aggregation of all the efforts of you and your colleagues. That's the business. The business is the people that are in the business. And increasingly, that's true. I mean, today, more than ever, the intangible assets of the business represent the bulk of its balance sheet. It's not the tangible assets like the factories and the, IP and kind of what businesses were built on 50 years ago. It's really the intangibles of who works there, how do they work together, what are the dynamics of those people. And so when you start to see it like that, whether you're in a position of leadership, whether you're a manager kind of coaching a team, or whether you've just entered the business as one of those team members, I think seeing it like that, seeing it like a team rather than an abstract business, really does empower you to take responsibility inside of that business and offer solutions. Like you were talking about, like a problem board and having a whole bunch of different things to engage with. Sometimes you don't see that happen in businesses because the level of trust isn't there. The leadership believes that they've got to create some kind of rosy view of the business for everybody that works there just so that they'll stay. And then the people that are in the business don't want to bring solutions or problems to the table that they can see because there isn't a trust that the leadership are going to value their contribution or engage with them. And so there's this weird dynamic that is often just a lack of trust within an organization. I think you can cut through that with authenticity. I mean, we certainly try and do that at REW. Don't talk around the issue, but kind of address the issue, frame the problem and talk to one another directly on how to solve it and what the implications are of not solving it. Sometimes there are fires that you can let burn and sometimes there certainly aren't. And so that kind of authentic approach is at least the way I like to think about building a business. And it comes from that philosophy that ultimately the business is the team. And so it's, if it's my problem, it's not just my problem, it's our problem. If it's your problem, it's not just your problem, it's our problem. So I think that's at the core of it.
It's interesting to me that it comes down to trust. And this is a big theme right now, what I'm hearing in other podcasts, the books I'm reading, blogs I'm reading, the conference I was at. It just comes down to trust and trusting our teams, whether it's, async work or getting work done or managing times, whatever that looks like, it comes down to trust. And when we put it in the context of the balancing of progress, people, profits, there's trust of us employees in our leaders as well as leaders in our team. It can't just be an upward trust. It's got to be, a circular trust around the entire team, entire organization. Because if something is out of balance, I know for me personally, I would want to know it. I don't want to just, I want to know how I can contribute, how I can help solve. If profitability isn't what we want it to be, where can I personally cut down on costs? If it's like, as long as you don't cut out coffee, I'm still good. I can still operate. But, where can we be creative and unleash that creativity?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think that's what people are just great at. Our ability to adapt to circumstance, our ability to create a new future is ultimately, I think, what makes us human. We have the ability to look at a environment, whether it's a business environment or a personal environment, and we're able to look at it and say, it can look different tomorrow. And that really is unique to our species. And that becomes that much more exciting when we can activate that same ability in each other, because we create so much more together than we create on our own. So I totally buy into what you onto there, Tim. I think the trust, though, is a big, big, hairy topic, whether it's in politics or in business or in bureaucracies or in, even in our personal relationships. Trust is an interesting concept to address. And I think sometimes in business where the trust conversation goes wrong is that it's like very narrow in its definition. It's like if you're in a leadership position, the trust that you were talking about going down is things like, are the people that I'm employing doing the work that I want them to do? Can I trust them to do the things that we agreed to hire them for? Can I trust them that they're doing it as frequently as we wanted them to. I mean, in this world of work from anywhere, that becomes a real topic. It's like, are they on a podcast in the mid-afternoon? Is that something we want them to be doing? But that's narrowly how people think about trust. And then if you're looking up in the organization, things are like, can I trust that I'm going to get my paycheck next month? Can I trust that I'm going to get my increase next year? Can I trust that I'm not going to get overlooked for a promotion? Can I trust that the work I do is going to be valued as my contribution, not my colleague's contribution? I mean, there's all sorts of weird things that are associated with trust, but that's not the trust that I'm talking about. I'm talking more broadly about each of us within an organization holding the vision of that organization and the plan for the future of that organization jointly, and trusting one another to make progress towards that plan as a team. And that's a different kind of trust. It's like, it requires obviously alignment with a plan. And so it's like, if you don't agree, well, then let's talk about it, because I'm trusting you to be aligned. And then beyond that, it's, I don't care when you come to work. I don't care how long you work. I don't care if you're doing the bullet points that were in your job description. But can I trust that you hold the same heart for this project as I do? If you do, then I'm not worried about those other things. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so that's sometimes a challenging leadership style for people to understand, because it's not something that they condition to. I think a lot of people don't have that experience of work. And so they bring some baggage from a more monitored or more managed ecosystem where, the KPIs and performance milestones and, you're going to tell me what's next, right? That kind of engagement. But I think it's so much more exciting when people can catch the heart of what it is that needs to be done, can bring the best of themselves to that endeavor, and trust one another to, do the work that needs to be done to get to the goal that you need to get to.
I love that. We're so aligned on that. I mean, we could spend an hour on that conversation in itself. Like we're 100% aligned. As leaders, I feel it's our responsibility to provide that clarity, that vision, that cast it out, and rally around it. Provide everyone with, hey, this is what you're responsible for to get us there. You might go from A to B. I might have taken, 1 to 2 instead of A to B, but we got to the same outcome in the time frame, and that's awesome. And you might go for a mountain bike ride in the middle of the day or paddleboard, but you got it done, and that's fine.
Exactly.
I don't care. We're beaten to that same drum, so to speak, and casting that vision, getting people excited, but also making the hard decisions that if there's people on the team, we may need to shift and to move people around or graduate people out of an organization, if you will. And in order to, it's great, ties right back to that conversation of balancing people and profits. And, it can be thrown out of balance really quickly if not everyone is aligned or bought into the vision and the values and the direction that we're going.
Yeah. I mean, I hate I think it comes back to that idealism that I was talking about earlier. I think I'm a little bit hopelessly idealistic sometimes, and I really do want to see the best for people and make it work within the context and the environment that you're in. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I mean, however you look at it, I've had to make a lot of tough decisions about people in teams, and I've had to ask a lot of people to go during your time as leader. Not a lot of people want to talk about that. The firing process is a day you would rather forget, whether you're on the receiving end or the end offering the news. But it is essential, especially in that kind of environment of trust that we just described, that trust in one another to move towards a goal as a team. The quickest way to destroy that is to tolerate the bad actors. And there are lots of reasons why people are not right for a particular project or a particular time in a business. Sometimes it's their personal issues, and sometimes it's the fit within the business, and sometimes it's a combination of both. Most often it is. But the quickest way to lose that trust in your team is when you don't address those kinds of issues, and you let bad actors continue to act badly and you don't hold them accountable to that. Not on behalf of the leadership or the business necessarily, but on behalf of the team. And that can be very demoralizing for people that are trying to bring their best to an engagement and they see that somebody on the other side either just doesn't get it or isn't helping us move forward. And so like, what are we going to do about that?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a tough part about balancing people and profits, or should I say just balancing people and projects, people and progress that projects need to make, because you want what's best for every individual person. And even, when you're sitting across the table from someone and you're giving them tough feedback, or the tough feedback is now escalated to, look, it's not working. That is a very difficult thing to do. And so if you just look at people, you wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? You try and do your best to move that person forward. But if you're balancing people, profit, and progress within an organization, you have to do that. You have to make those tough calls. And I think ultimately that's the tough part about leadership. And that's why some people don't want it. And that's fair. There's some days I don't want it either.
Yeah, sometimes we have to make those tough calls. And I think as we kind of wrap up here, I love that how you summarized it. We can't just look at people on its own. We can't just look at profits on its own and progress. Well, we can't have progress without people around you, even if it's just yourself. And I'm curious. So for those who are listening, for those who know our podcast, I always like to end with that one thing, that one takeaway that somebody can go into their workplace or into their organization and really kind of drive some change. What would be your advice when you, in the context of trust or people and profit and progress, and what's the one thing somebody can do today?
Yeah, I think there's a word that I don't know when it popped up in my lexicon, and I don't know if it was to do with some of these conversations that I'd had before or book that I'd been reading, but probably about 10 years ago, I heard this idea of intentionally writing your story, if you know what I mean. And so if you are intentional about the way that you want to approach the organization that you work for, the intentional about the engagement that you want to have with your colleagues, intentional about the future that you want to have within that business, you have, and everybody has, no matter what, station you have within a business, everybody has the ability to be intentional about their next engagement, their next bit of work, their next thought, their next offering to the team. And it's just something that I really like that, both within myself, but also within my teammates. If somebody is intentional, they've thought about something, they've got an opinion, they've brought it to the table with, the usual great values of humility and respect, but they're intentional about what they're trying to drive. I think everybody can offer that. And the more often people can offer that, not just be passive and reactive to what's going on around you within your team or within your business, but intentional about the impact that you want to have, you will definitely go far in your organization and in your career.
I love that. Intentionality. It just wraps up our conversation so nicely about, thinking about progress. You got to be intentional about it. Thinking about leading a people, intentional. Profits, intentional. Being an entrepreneur, and I know we didn't really dive in too deep on that conversation, but there's an intentionality of creating that space, or creating, as a leader, creating the space. But if there's not space as an individual contributor, creating it for yourself within that organization and adding that value. So, yeah. Simon, thanks so much for coming on and sharing the 3 Ps, the people, profits, progress. I love that.
There's always going to be 3, Tim. Two's never enough.
No, I started adding a 4th one. I'm like, no, it's got to be 3. No, I love it. It's memorable. And for those who are listening, please head to our site. We're, obviously have the transcript up there if you can't write them down while you're commuting, but you can grab it from our site. But also, we'll put the links up there to get a hold of Simon. And for those who are listening outside of Canada, REW.ca, if you're looking for property investment in Canada, that's the site you need to go to and to check out. So again, Simon, thanks again for coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.